It's the most wonderful time of the year. World Juniors. As we get closer to the Boxing Day kickoff of the 2024 IIHF World Junior Ice Hockey Championships in Gothenburg, Sweden, I figured it's time we hop on here for a little tourney preview and talk about which players you should be watching for. Now, there are a lot of junior eligible players who won't be joining their respective countries this year, including the top 3 selections in last year's NHL entry draft: Connor Bedard, Leo Carlsson, and Adam Fantilli, but there is no shortage of talent on the ice this year. The back-to-back defending champion Canadians lead Group A, along with the host country Sweden, Sweden's rival Finland, both of whom went without a medal last year, accompanied by Germany and Latvia. Group B features the reigning silver medalists from Czechia, the betting odds favorites the United States, along with Slovakia, Switzerland, and the recently re-promoted Norway. It should be a heck of a tournament again this winter, and I think the Swedes and Americans are the cream of the crop this year, but let's dive into things a little bit deeper here. But first, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Engaging with this video is the best Christmas present I could ask for this year, so let's get together and chat World Juniors in the comments. I already mentioned that the Americans have one of the best rosters this year, so let's start with them. They have 10 guys who were first-round draft picks in the NHL, and all but 2 of their players are drafted, while both of those remaining 2 are draft-eligible 2005s. Rutger McGrody of University of Michigan will don the C on his jersey and is expected to play a big role for the team. Boston College's trio of freshmen will be relied upon for offense, just as they have been in the NCAA so far. The trio includes Will Smith, who went 4th overall to San Jose, Ryan Leonard, who went 8th overall to Washington, and Gabe Perreault, son of Yannick Perreault, who went 23rd overall to the Rangers. Add in their Boston College teammate Cutter Gauthier, who went 5th overall to Philadelphia the year prior and currently sits 2nd in college hockey in goals, and the US has a lot of firepower. So who to watch for on offense? I expect big things from Cutter Gauthier, who had 10 points in last year's tournament and a good showing at the Men's World Championships last year as well, recording 9 points in 10 games. And this isn't to gloss over the likes of Gavin Brindley, Gavin Hayes, Oliver Moore, and Frank Nazar, but the other forward I might be most excited to watch on this USA squad is Jimmy Snuggerud. The big-bodied winger put up 13 points in 7 games at last year's World Juniors playing with Logan Cooley, and I expect him to do more of the same this time around. Snuggerud and Gauthier to me are the main keys of the US offense, and I'm excited to see who they line up with and how they start the tournament. With that being said, the US blue line is very strong as well. Lane Hudson and Ryan Chesley look to be the top pairing, which will surely be one of the best, if not the best, in the entire tournament. And they also have Seamus Casey out of Michigan and projected first-rounder Zeev Bium, who's had a great freshman year so far for Denver. Watch for that top pair of Hudson and Chesley to log a ton of minutes, especially when the US plays stiffer competition later on in the tournament. Between the pipes, Trey Augustine and Jacob Fowler should be a great tandem in net for the Americans, but honestly, I think that they're going to score so many goals in Group B that the goalies won't be much of a storyline until later in the tournament. Then we have Sweden, the host country, headlined by returning players Jonathan Lekkerimäki and Axel Sandin-Pellikka. I truly love both of these players and think they will dominate in this year's event, especially on home soil. Lekkerimäki is a skilled forward and a pure goal scorer who went 15th overall to Vancouver in 2022 and will be playing in his 3rd World Juniors for Sweden. Sandin-Pellikka, a smaller defenseman, is a smooth skating D-man that was a major standout for me at last year's tournament. I thought he was going to go top 10 in the NHL draft last year. I also really like Liam Ogren and Noah Ostlund, both of which will play key roles for Sweden this year. Ogren, the Swedish captain, was a first-round pick of the Wild in 2022, while Ostlund went a few picks earlier to Buffalo in the same draft. The team is honestly really deep on both offense and defense, while Hugo Havlet is expected to be one of the tournament's better goalies. To me, Sweden will be a formidable force this year and will continue to come at you in waves. I'm very excited to watch them play. Finland will be a pesky skilled team as always, but I do think that they're a tier below Sweden, the US, and Canada. 2 guys that I'm most interested in on Finland are draft-eligible players who are expected to go in the first round this summer: Konsta Helenius and Emil Hemming. Helenius is expected to go in the top 10 of the upcoming NHL draft as a shifty forward who currently has great stats for a 17-year-old in La Liga. Hemming, on the other hand, is a much bigger player and has put up lower point totals to date in La Liga, but it's still impressive at their age. Honestly, Finland has a lot of good dudes and a lot of solid two-way players, but these are the 2 that I'm going to be watching most closely for this tournament. When it comes to Czechia, they've impressed impressed in recent years. I don't think they'll repeat last year's run to the finals, but they still have a pretty good team. Adam Jiricek, the younger brother of Columbus Blue Jackets David Jiricek, is who I'll have my eyes on the most, as he is a projected mid-first round pick this summer. Adam has a ton of raw talent and can play well at both ends of the ice and isn't afraid to throw the body around, which we love. Jiri Kulich up front will be the key cog offensively for Czechia as a 19-year-old who currently has 22 points in 23 AHL games and got into one NHL game for the Sabres earlier this year. Kulich will without a doubt be one of the best scorers in the tournament, and he will be relied upon heavily for Czechia. My last note on Czechia, I really hope Edward Chalet has a good tournament. He's had a pretty slow start to his OHL career in Barrie after being the 20th overall pick last year to the Seattle Kraken, but I really like the way that he plays the game. From Filip Michar to Adam Sikora, Slovakia will be bringing some good players to this year's tournament, but none better than Dalibor Dvorsky, who is tearing it up on the Sudbury Wolves, along with reigning goaltender of the tournament, Adam Gagin. Gagin, the 6'3" netminder, is currently in his second USHL season with the Green Bay Gamblers and posted a godly .936 save percentage in last year's tournament, alongside a 2.4 goals against average. He was the 35th overall pick of the Blackhawks in the most recent draft, which is always pretty high for a goalie. And when we talk about Dvorsky, he has a pro-ready frame with a ton of skill. He was the 10th overall pick of the St. Louis Blues and has looked fabulous in his recent transition to the O. If Slovakia wants to make a push in this tournament, which they can, it'll be on the backs of these two guys in particular. I think they lack some of the depth to finish on the podium, but they'll be a good team to watch nonetheless. Germany will play as hard as always and might surprise us once or twice, but they just don't have the depth to make a run this year. They do have a pair of NHL drafted forwards that I'll be looking at, Julian Lutz, who went to Arizona, and Kevin Bicker, who went to Detroit. Their defense, though, is expected to be pretty weak, and as such, they'll end up giving a ton of shots, and it'll just be tough for them to outscore opponents. They've been in the top-tier tournament the last 4 years after spending 4 straight years in the lower division, and I think they'll be able to avoid relegation this year as well, but we'll see how it plays out. The Swiss don't have the name value that they've had in some of the recent tournaments, but they'll be difficult to play against as always. In net, they have Cristobal Huet's son, Iwan, as well as Alessio Beglieri, who I saw quite a few times in net for the Mississauga Steelheads last year. Neither of these two goalies strike me as a real game breaker that can take the Swiss on a run, but both can hold down the fort enough to make them competitive in games. I will also call out Daniil Ustinkov, who could be fun to watch as a London Knights pick in the CHL import draft. Aside from that, offense is going to be pretty limited for Switzerland, and I expect them to be in the bottom half of the standings when all is said and done. Norway's next on my list here, and unfortunately for our Norwegian hockey fans, there sadly isn't much to discuss here. They were promoted to this year's tournament after last being in the top division in 2014, so it's been a minute for Norway. They will undoubtedly face a ton of shots against the top teams in this tournament, and honestly just won't have the scoring to make up for it. However, Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard is my focus here, as he's been noted a potential first-round pick in the upcoming NHL draft. His point totals in the Allsvenskan don't necessarily jump off the page, but that's to be expected from a draft-eligible player in that league. He's got good size and a good 200-foot game, and I'll be curious how he can drive offense for this Norwegian team. Overall, I hope that for Norway's sake, they can avoid relegation this year and start to get some consistency in the top division. Next up, Latvia is the other team I expect to end up in the relegation round, likely against Norway. They managed to sweep Austria in the relegation round last year, so this will be their 3rd straight year in the top tournament, but I don't see it going much better than that for them. Dives Rolovs, pardon the pronunciation, has the potential to stand on his head in net for the Latvians and has put up some great numbers in the Null this year, but it'll be a very tall task for him. Florida Panthers draft pick Sandis Valemis will be the man who has to lead the offense in my opinion. He has some solid numbers in the O, but I just don't think it'll be enough to keep up with the top teams in this tournament. And now, last but not least, my rooting interest, Canada. They have a very deep squad with a lot of name recognition, but I'll come right out and say it. I think their back-to-back golds probably comes to an end this year. Macklin Celebrini is the biggest name going right now. Be sure to check out the video I recently did on him. I'll link it here. The projected first overall pick in the upcoming draft is bound to be a stud for years to come in the NHL, but I want to slow this down and not put too much pressure on the guy. What Connor Bedard did last year as a draft-eligible player is never the expectation. He went so far above and beyond what we could have hoped for. Putting that kind of expectation of performance on Celebrini is unfair, but I am very excited to watch him play. He has all the skill in the world and should be a key cog for Canada. Honestly, the goaltending for me, I don't know any of these three guys super well, and it seems like they're all going to get a bit of an opportunity, but I think Rosso is going to end up taking majority of the starts early. The back end for Canada is pretty deep, and I'll be watching two guys in particular. Denton Matejchuk and Tristan Leno. Matejchuk has been on absolute fire to start the year in the WHL, and the 2022 12th overall pick by the Columbus Blue Jackets will get a ton of power play opportunity, but as will Tristan Leno. Leno's a right-handed D-man who got 7 games with the Anaheim Ducks this year and recorded 3 points after a great QMJHL career. When it comes to forwards, Connor Geekie is a guy that I'll be interested in focusing on as he has torched the WHL so far this year. He was the 11th overall pick in 2022, one before Matejchuk, and has great puck skills and can use his size to play well at both ends of the rink. Matt Savoy is another forward bound to get a ton of ice time as the 9th overall pick in 2022. He played 1 NHL game, 6 AHL games, and now 11 WHL games so far this season, and he tallied 24 points in those 11 WHL games. He's a speedster with amazing puck skills and not afraid to use either. Lastly, Matthew Patra, for those who aren't sure how to pronounce it, was loaned from the Boston Bruins, and as someone who's played 27 games on one of the best teams in the NHL this year, I expect him to log a lot of minutes as one of Canada's top forwards. Don't be surprised to see Patra involved in a lot of their success, especially in defensive situations. So there you have it. That's my list of players that I'll be keeping a close eye on. Beyond that, every year the media gets to vote on the All-Star team from the tournament. We're not big enough in media to do that yet, but I'm going to give my picks anyway. I think the All-Star team could end up looking something like this. Cutter Gauthier, Jonathan Lekeri-Mackey, and Matthew Patra up front. Lane Hudson and Axel Sandin Pellikka on the back end, and Adam Gage in between the pipes. It's a pretty diverse list, and there's some guys that can make it on there for sure, with the likes of Celebrini, of course, and some of the stars on the US offense. When you look at these players, it's a diverse list of countries that they're coming from, which to me means it'll be a great tournament, and I expect that for sure. When it comes to team results, if I had to guess, I think we're looking at a US, Canada, Sweden, and Finland Final Four competing for the medals. Czechia and Slovakia could very easily squeak their way into that, but for me, US, Canada, and Sweden are the big three-headed monster, the top 3 teams, while Finland will certainly be hungry after missing out on a medal last year. Nonetheless, it should be an unreal couple weeks of international hockey, as it always is. It's one of my favorite events every year, and it's in a very cool location this year in Sweden. I hope we get some cool storylines, some underdog victories, and some overtime action, but let me know down below who you're interested in watching, and of course, who you think takes home the gold.